Welcome to You're Making It Worse. I'm Elliot Glazer.
I'm Brent Sullivan.
And I'm H. Alan Scott.
We're here. We're queer.
Meh. Textual healing.
So by now you've almost certainly heard about how crazy the Alitos are. And now this is, I do want to toot my own horn for a second. I've said this for years, and I mean it. I've said it for years. Sam Alito's crazier than Clarence Thomas. I don't like Clarence Thomas either. Clarence Thomas is also crazy, but Sam Alito has been next level since 05 when he was confirmed.
And we're talking about the Supreme Court Justice.
The Supreme Court Justice, Sam Alito.
I mean, he's always been like very conservative.
He's not just very conservative, he's annoyingly conservative. Like there's over the last 20 years that he's been on the court, there are all these cases where like he just takes annoying stances. He's like one of the only justices that kind of takes sometimes these anti-free speech stances if it like goes against his own like personal views. He's such an embarrassment to the judiciary. And
who put him on the court?
George W. Bush.
George W. Bush.
And it was in that weird moment where Rehnquist died and Sandra Day O'Connor retired, and Roberts was just going to be a part, I think, just a justice on the Supreme Court. But then when Rehnquist died, who was Chief Justice, Bush made Roberts Chief Justice so that he would be Chief Justice for 40 years, basically, and made Alito just a regular Supreme Court justice, or Associate Justice.
Yeah. So, all right, so let's get into it. So, obviously, everyone's probably heard about Lauren Windsor, a progressive reporter.
I don't think they have. So many people, like I talk to people about it, and they don't know anything about it.
All right, so we learned recently that Marsha-Ann, who is the wife of Sam Alito, Marsha-Ann Alito is even crazier than Sam. Lauren Windsor is a progressive reporter, and she secretly recorded Sam Alito. And by the way, she also secretly recorded my baby, John Roberts, Chief Justice John Roberts, but he didn't take the bait. And what she was doing was she was pretending that Lauren Windsor is a progressive activist, but she was pretending to be an
Catholic,
alt-right, super conservative activist.
Yeah.
And so she was giving them sort of baiting questions that would ideally sort of elicit really extreme responses from these conservative justices, just to kind of get a bunch of sound bites. I'm not a huge fan of this method. I'm not Dinesh D'Souza, who does that on the right, by the way. And I'm not.
They had the same thing with the right did it with Planned Parenthood as well.
Yeah, and I was just going to say Dinesh D'Souza is a famous example of a right winger who's done very similar things. So it goes both ways.
So icky, yeah.
That said, in the recordings, this Lauren Windsor also interviewed Marsha-Ann Alito, because I think she came across these people at like a large fundraiser or some sort of gala in DC. And Marsha-Ann really let her freak out when talking about the pride flag being flown near her house. According to the New York Times, this is, I'm going to read a couple excerpts, quotes from the exchange. You know what I want? Marsha-Ann Alito said to Lauren Windsor.
You gotta do it like her. You gotta do it like her.
Yeah, okay.
Do it like
Marsha-Ann
Susan
Alito said to Lauren Windsor, I want a Sacred Heart of Jesus flag because I have to look across the lagoon at the pride flag for the next month. According to the New York Times, Miss Alito said that after she suggested the Sacred Heart of Jesus flag as a retort to the symbol for LGBTQ rights, her husband said, "Oh, please don't put up a flag." So I guess for once ever, Sam Alito is actually not the most crazy conservative person in a story.
Hasn't she been the one that's recently? Well, he's sort of threw her under the bus when they asked him, but he was the one who flew the American flag upside down to show his solidarity with the
American flag. Her solidarity is what he says.
He threw her under the bus, but it's their home together, and and that the flag was flown upside down to show solidarity with the
January
idea, with January 6th, the idea that the election was overthrown. But that's a case that is under his jurisdiction.
No, it is and it isn't. It is in that, like, if a case is brought to the Supreme Court, but he doesn't his jurisdiction is the United States. So like
Right.
it doesn't really.
So
it
it's
doesn't really have
already
that.
weird and inappropriate that's happening, and then it's like, oh, he blames his wife, which is bizarre, and then the flag story gets complicated even further when she gets caught like complaining about the pride flag. What's up with these people?
We've talked about this before on the podcast. It's like I'm sort of sorry. Let me rephrase this. As the urban-rural divide, liberal, conservative, Democrat, red-blue divide becomes increasingly urban versus rural. I'm still fascinated by these crazy hyper-conservatives that they manage to still find that are elites. Sam Alito went to Yale. I'm pretty sure she did too. Sam Alito lived in Philadelphia before he was nominated to the court. He lives in D.C. now. I've looked up his kids. They live in D.C. They live in New York City. And it's like, and yet somehow, so they have, they're surrounded by, by urbanism, by diversity, by certainly LGBTQ people.
I think they live in a diverse area.
If she's ever had her hair cut in her life in Washington, D.C. or Philadelphia, she's been surrounded by gay men.
I think that's just it, is that like, and I think Democrats and liberal people in general like to make that comparison that like, oh, well, where you live dictates your politics. And that is not always the case. Oftentimes that is not the case. I mean, you look at how Midwestern women voted in the 2016 election against Hillary Clinton, and that where you live and who you live around does not necessarily indicate your party preference or your political stance. And so people are more nuanced, and people benefit from progressive policy. Conservatives benefit from progressive policies in urban cities, and liberal people sometimes benefit from conservative policies in smaller cities like taxes, etc. So there's a give and take for everything. And I will say, it actually offends me that anyone would call what Lauren Windsor does journalism or reporting. That's not what journalists do. That is not what any good journalist would do. Just like the who was the person who did Planned Parenthood?
Dinesh. You said Dinesh.
I don't know if it was Dinesh D'Souza, but he's
just
famous,
like If the Right did it too. And I find it's laughable and it's upsetting. And also, I have to say, even though perhaps I don't share, Mrs. Alito's views, I am also kind of like, girl, fly that Jesus flag. There ain't nothing stopping you. Like, just like there's nothing stopping your neighbor from flying the pride flag. And you both have a beautiful, wonderful constitutional right to do that. And that should be what is celebrated. So even this, like, this whole sort of recording and trashing, their politics are their politics. But to me, there was nothing crazy said in these tapings. Literally, it is just this person who has, yes, this is a conservative person. We are not surprised by this. I'm not surprised they live in urban areas and they have the politics they do, because people are nuanced. And there was nothing huge about this recording other than, shocker, Alito's wife doesn't like homosexuals.
Yeah, I mean, I hear that. I also agree. I felt like ultimately Alito's quotes, I think, were again, they represent to me that he's not a leader. Like he doesn't seek to kind of assuage anxiety or bring people together. He talks about how, he begrudgingly says, yeah, well, I guess we can live together peacefully, I suppose, but it's really hard because we disagree on a lot. Red and blue folks disagree on a lot of things, and I think that and
that
again,
is part of the problem. But also, I'm not shocked that he has that opinion, and also it doesn't necessarily bother me that he has that opinion, because, like, that's why he was appointed to the Supreme Court. His politics and his positions and how the type of conservative that he was in 2005 is the same in 2024. So, like, he hasn't changed all that much over the past 20 years or so.
Yeah. I think in theory, I would like to think that regardless of how conservative or liberal someone is when they're appointed to the court, they aspire to that position, to that seat.
We want Earl Warrens. We want to go back to that type of person who's appointed to the Supreme Court as a Republican under a Republican presidency, like Earl Warren in 1950, whatever, under Eisenhower. And then eventually he becomes the beacon of the civil rights movement and making decisions that actually create change in this country. And also what he did during the I think Nuremberg trials as well. Like, we want to see that progression, but we just don't have that. That doesn't happen all that often on the Supreme Court, in my opinion.
No, it's true. But the argument that I was making is, regardless of your politics, you should be working towards bringing people together, and that's what Chief Justice John Roberts did in these secret recordings. Instead of taking her bait and talking about, because she baited him with some question about creating a Christian nation, and he said, well, I have Jewish friends and Muslim friends who wouldn't agree with creating a Christian nation, and that's not the role of the court. That is what a leader should do, and Sam Alito is just simply an embarrassment. Now, that said, I do think it would be appropriate under the circumstances to do something to kind of get back at Marsha-Ann. And I was thinking we should inspire our listeners, some listeners somewhere, to do a drag rendition of Marsha-Ann Alito. And I asked ChatGPT for some help with this.
Wow. I think you can do that,
but it
Brent.
wasn't very good. I was thinking about like creating a drag name, and the only thing I could think of was Gertha-Ann Alito, something like that. Something like a Martha, Gertha,
Martha-Ann
maybe like
Alito.
Girthy-Ann Alito, something like that. Like, what would be a good
Alito,
Martha
you better
Alito?
Don't. Alito, you better not raise that flag.
Maybe.
I'm honestly just impressed by the idea that Brent put that
into chat
gay thought that like a gay can't be thought to. I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, well,
show some evolution on your part.
I only dabble when it's to spite people I don't like.
Or my birthday.
Yeah.
Not even joking.
We are joined today by the two people behind Solarpunk Farms, which is so exciting. Spencer Scott and Nick Schwanz. Hello.
Hey, guys.
Hello.
How's life on the farm?
Yeah.
Life on the farm is great. Thanks so much for having us.
Let's hear a little bit about what Solarpunk Farms is and how you got there.
Solarpunk Farms is a little queer-run regenerative farm up in Guerneville, California. Spencer and I started it about 4 years ago. We both worked in climate and decided that we wanted to kind of join the climate movement in something that wasn't just behind a computer. And so we decided to start this little project.
So what is a regenerative farm?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah, Spencer, do you want to say that?
Yeah, absolutely. Basically, it's in contrast to a conventional farming, large crop rows of corn, monoculture type farming, where usually doing that practice, you are depleting the land and making it unhealthy over time. And so regenerative farms try to reverse that process and ultimately add health and nutrients to the soil over time.
And how did you, I'm the least outdoorsy person like there is. I don't know what to do in the sun ever. My skin does not see sun. I put makeup on to make it look like I see sun. So Nick, I want to know how did you get into this? How did this all start for you? Like, just from long before you even had the farm, like, were you picking up trees and doing shit? I don't know what you do in outdoors.
Tree hugging.
Yeah.
I would say we were both like medium outdoorsy people, but we were never raised on farms. We never had any agricultural background. This is like totally new to us too, which is why we oftentimes are like, we have a farm, but we're not farmers, because that is a moniker we do not yet deserve. But essentially it just happened because Spencer and I were both reading the same books, and we kind of got radicalized around the same time. And Spencer quit his job in biotech and started working 100% on climate. I started shifting my work to be more climate focused, because everything we were reading was just like, this is the all-consuming problem that's going to take over the rest of our lives. And so we started reading some really interesting books, got excited about the prospect of doing a land project. And then, to be totally honest, we saw Biggest Little Farm. And
oh yeah, my parents love that movie.
Yeah, really. All parents love that movie. Yeah.
Probably get that a lot.
We are your parents. We're their parents, probably, for sure. Also, anytime people come up to the farm, they're like, "Oh my God, have you seen The Biggest Little Farm?" And we're like, "No."
Yeah.
No, tell me about it. No, we are very much inspired by that.
Yeah.
But to be queer in the farm space, I know there are a lot of queer farmers out there. I know of one, actually. I follow one on Instagram. But like, it does feel, A, it's hot, but B, it's confusing. Do you know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
like to me, it's a setup for like a really good porn scene, but also kind of great for the world. So like how in terms of being queer, what kind of response do you get from people who like, are surprised maybe that you're these two queer farmers out in the middle of nowhere?
Because Guerneville is that in like the countryside?
So interesting. We get this question a lot, and it's really funny because Guerneville,
Sorry.
we're just no worries. It's spelled strangely.
No, you
We're
should feel
like
bad,
an
Elliot.
hour.
Guerneville.
Guerneville. Get it right next time.
Yeah.
We're just an hour and like 20 minutes north of San Francisco in Sonoma County. And a lot of people don't know this, but Guerneville is a queer vacation town. It's like every business in town is like lesbian or gay owned, essentially.
Oh, wow.
That's awesome.
And it's been kind of like a vacation town for queers since the 70s and earlier. So it has this really cool history, which is why we chose this spot. But
Is that where they do Radical Fairy stuff? Like, is that the Radical Fairy area? I got invited to that once, and I said no because it was outdoors.
The big one is like in Tennessee or something, but then there's more up here in Sonoma County and Mendocino. There's a lot of Radical Fairies up here. And, some of them have been here since the 70s. But yeah, it's kind of like we want to create a space where queers feel excited to come to, because I think queer culture doesn't always, as you said, like mix with farms. So
I had a very, very close friend from high school whom I was in touch with in New York, but we lost touch. But I recently got an email about this person's 40th birthday, and so I decided to Google her and see what she was up to and how she was doing, and we ended up. Turns out she lived a mile away from me in Los Angeles, and we ended up getting drinks, and I learned that she got her master's in some sort of like sustainability systems or something, and quite literally moved to San Francisco and worked on like co-op commune farms for like 6 or 8 years. Before I saw her, I did record a special video for her because this person wanted us to make a video for her 40th birthday, and I told her I donated, I think it was $1,000 to a meat processing nonprofit that would enable, and that her name now adorned I think the machine that molds a meat slurry into patties. Tell us like on a daily basis, what do you guys do?
What does that look like?
What does it look like? What are you growing? Who joins you? Tell us all about that stuff.
Yeah, we have no like normal days. One of the things that people don't really see, because Instagram only cherry picks the cool parts of your life, but is that we still have our full-time jobs. So I work as a consultant for climate companies. Spencer works for a climate nonprofit. So we still have our little typey 9-to-5 things, and we're sort of moonlight farmers right now,
which is not uncommon. I mean, just in terms of just outside of anything like that, it's not uncommon for a lot of farmers in America right now to have to moonlight in other areas because farming and the money that is not being made on farms in this country it's a requirement for them to moonlight in other areas.
Yeah. If you guys did a 2-hour podcast, we would have more time to talk about how broken the food flow of finances, but it's so sad. We always joke like you have to have an off-farm job to afford a farm.
So then where do you make time? Where do you make time between your typey jobs? Where do you make time to man the farm? Like
I'm turned on.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, stop using that as power language.
Yeah. How do you man the farm? Go on, tell me.
Brent, say "man the farm" again, please.
Man the farm.
Man the farm.
Any opportunity we get.
Yeah. Well, but when do you find time to do it?
Yeah, that journey seems like a tall order. And sorry.
Well, I only work 4 days a week, so it's super easy.
That's it.
But essentially, we work on the farm on the weekends and before and after work. I definitely think kind of allusion to Nick being like, we're not farmers. It's because we don't have the time to do it all. But I think, I don't know if we mentioned we started from absolute scratch. Like this was a degraded horse property. It was compacted sand and weeds and nothing else. And so it's been a long process of, bringing life back to the farm. And I think we've come a long ways. We're about to be 4 years. But yeah, it's kind of like, any moment we get, and people come up from the city on weekends to come help us often. So we got a lot of work
That's
in on
right.
weekends.
Oh, go
Yeah,
ahead,
you were
Elliot.
you were talking about how you purposely choose to engage the queer community to create this more ecologically minded civilization. So when you invite people up, what are you inviting? Friends? Are you inviting students? And who's coming and what are they learning about?
It started out just as friends because a couple years ago it was like, hey guys, we did something stupid. Do you want to help take us out of this hole?
Did you move there like completely? Like you don't live anywhere else?
Oh no, we moved there full time. Yeah. Every time we talk, our Guerneville is like mostly 70 and up queer men. And so anytime people,
What a dream.
Yeah.
What a dream.
It's one of the only places where you can like, and it is like a little country gay place, and it's the only place in America where you can like drive by and see like a rainbow flag and an American flag on the same porch.
Wow.
So,
You guys got to come up for Lazy Bear Weekend. It's when all of the bears flood into Guerneville and they float the river in like little tiny donuts. Pretty cute.
Oh, see, I want to do that again. I've tried to float too, and it's just I can't do it. It's just like I'm not. I need
not for
better
everyone.
things.
It's fine.
But wait, I do want to know.
There's a raft.
Even the rafts are too much for me. I'm a large person. But I do want to know. Like one of the things that I find so great about what you do, and what I think the possibilities of what you do is that, like for me, I've always said like. I feel like I'm a liberal person and I care about the causes and I care about environmentalism and I try to do my part, but it also seems like so overwhelming to be in part, to understand like what I can do. I have an electric car. I try to do my part. I recycle. I do those things. But like, I do think that what you guys are doing has an opportunity for like a faggot like me to come to a farm and to see sort of like actually the dirt and how things work and how we can like be sustainable and all of those things. So like, I want to know what sort of things and what are you hoping to do with the farm that will initiate a conversation between city faggots like me who just have their nails painted and don't want to go outdoors to come to a farm and sort of see to get their nails a little dirty, if you will.
Yeah. And I think that's a perfect question because it also answers the one Elliot was just asking too, which is the point is make it fun. Like when people think about doing land projects, sustainability work, gardening, it's all for a very long time. It's felt like this chore. It goes into like the chore mentality of our brains.
Yeah.
And so when we invite people up to do these volunteer weekends, we call them work play weekends because yes, we have a project where we have to go do something, but we're also like blasting Beyonce half naked, drinking cocktails and like screaming at each other in silly voices because we're trying to make this a fun party where people we want to reprogram queer people in the city to think, oh, I've got a weekend. I can either fly to New York and go to a whole bunch of clubs, or I can go up to Solarpunk Farms and get my hands dirty and get in the hot tub for the weekend. And that's like,
oh, you have a hot tub. I love a hot tub.
Yeah.
Well, I got my raccoon.
Of course.
Hot tub.
Spencer goes, of course.
Here's another little tidbit. I had a garden when I was a kid. I was actually really into gardening. I got into it in high school. And one of the things that I learned was that it really is incredible how much food you get from these plants. Like anyone who's ever planted a tomato plant, you'll get 500 cherry tomatoes from one plant. The best red pepper I've ever had in my entire life was the one green pepper that I left on a plant long enough in Michigan to turn red before our first frost. And it was the single sweetest red pepper I've ever had ever. So what for you guys has been like these moments, these things that you grew that were either harder than you thought, easier than you thought, and ultimately even more endearing and redeeming than you anticipated?
Well, I just want to say that like that moment you had with your one little red pepper is kind of exactly what we're trying to accomplish. I think when we invite people here, we want, first of all, to acknowledge how complicated climate is and sustainability is. And the goal here is to teach people about that. But ultimately, we want people to care. And so like having those experiences where you're like, whoa, we grew this and then let's make food out of it. And it's the most delicious meal you've ever had. And suddenly you're creating a relationship with that. That's like the dream. So there've been tons of moments like that. Nick, do you have one in particular. I mean, one year we grew like 30 tomatoes, and it was the craziest thing we ever did because it's just us two harvesting them, and they truly one plant is more than we can handle.
Wow. Yeah, we grow the best fucking tomatoes on planet Earth, and I don't know whether or not the soil is just like determined to make tomatoes particularly incredible, but we've had like chefs come and be like, "There's something up with y'all's tomatoes."
Wow.
Yeah, I'm very proud of that. I will stand by it, and I will fight anybody that tries to take that from me.
Are you guys vegetarians, or this is all just like, what are you growing in particular? Just fruits and vegetables?
Yeah, and I have a pitch for you too. Sorry, before you answer that, I think this is just me, writer, creative person. I think you should grow cucumbers. And I think you could, because you said on your website that you do sexy and sustainable events, and I think you could combine the sexy with the cucumber, and then at the end of the event be like, we have a hot tub, you know?
I don't hate
no reason. We have a hot tub, no reason.
Yeah.
We've been planning on launching a farmers OnlyFans for a really long time. So we will absolutely add that to the list.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The next recession, we're on it.
I'm here. I will support that. But yeah, so what do you like? What other things outside of cucumbers and tomatoes are you growing on
and
there?
do you eat meat?
Yeah.
I know. Elliot, that was so forceful. So aggressive. Do you eat meat?
I'll start with what we grow. So we think about everything in sort of two folds of the farm. We have our annuals garden, which is where we grow the stuff that you traditionally think of is finding in a grocery store. We grow tomatoes and peppers and lettuces and ground cherries and kale and all that kind of stuff, which is very like annuals based. But that's a really small part of the area. Most of the land in the front is actually dedicated towards growing what permaculturists call a food forest. And so that's where we plant exclusively perennial plants. So plants that you don't replant every single year. And you jam as much of those plants into a small space as possible to create a super, super dense, super diverse food system where you can basically be like, hey, I want dinner. I'm going to go wander through the food forest and you'll be able to pick all the stuff you need. So that includes things like nut trees, avocados, fruit. Those are all your tree layer. And underneath that, you have berry bushes and different like edible greens. And then you have your root layer where you're growing,
potatoes or yams,
potatoes, everything. So that's kind of like a really dense food experiment that we're working on. We're only about 2 years into that. We've got about 80 fruit and nut trees, and now we're working on planting all the other stuff. But
when you say it's an experiment, do you mean like, is that sort of rainforest type environment? Is that like, has it been proven by studies and experience that it works like wonder, like magic, or are you kind of experimenting and tinkering with how it with the results?
Yeah, I think it's very much proven that diversity improves both the yield, the overall health of the ecosystem, and the nutritional value of plants. In America, we like everything straight and clean and in a line and monoculture, right? Like, but that doesn't exist in nature. Nature has really evolved in a way that it embraces diversity and messiness. And so a food forest is sort of showing how can humans interact with that and cultivate the way that nature likes growing by strategically putting the things around each other that like each other.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, this is like a common practice in where we were educated for how to do this in a permaculture design course. It's something that people do all over the world, and something we're experimenting with because on a personal level, like we're learning how to do it. And and so as far as do we eat meat, if season 3 of Hacks taught me anything, it's like this is the time to like insert climate information. But so we basically don't eat red meat. The only meat we eat is chicken, and we do have chickens on the farm. So we have lots of fresh eggs.
I've always wanted to have a chicken.
Yeah, we have 13 or 12 of them right now. I think we're gonna get more soon. We could have about like 30.
Do you name them, and then do you eat them if you name them?
We don't eat our chickens because there's like a difference between, and I learned this when I moved to a farm. You either have layer hens or broiler hens, which is for eating, and we have the layer hens. They just pump out eggs.
Also, Spencer has the emotional connections to all the chicken and could never eat.
I can't imagine.
I know. I
They're
feel like
my
I feel like
sweet little
I would have
angels.
that with you, Spencer, and that just going out there and talking to the chickens. I could talk to chickens for like hours. That's how
Yeah.
I would be outdoors, just sitting with the chicken.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. We know you're in now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm in. I'll sit with the chickens. I don't mind. Well, I wanted to know, I mean, before we wrap things up, I wanted to know like what making this big move, because that is a big move, and that's a move that I think for a lot of queer people who live in urban cities, which is I would say most queer people, there's always that thought in their head of maybe I could move out of this big city and do something into a small area, to a farm area, whatever it is, have a quieter life. Maybe I don't need this loud queer life that's constantly around me. But yet it's daunting because it seems scary because we've been conditioned that outside of urban areas are dangerous. Outside of urban areas are scary, that maybe we shouldn't go there. Maybe there's not a life for us. So what I want to know is like, what, from both of you individually, what has been the biggest surprise to you sort of leaving that urban life into this farm life, and what's been sort of beneficial to your life that you weren't expecting, you know?
I'll just jump in quickly to say I think community is so key there, and I think when we first started looking for a place, went up to Oregon, and we could just immediately tell we're too far away from our community. We don't know anyone here.
Were you guys in like San Francisco?
Yeah, we were in San Francisco. Yeah. And so, and I think a lot of people moved during COVID and tried to like, people in LA went to Joshua Tree and all of these different rural areas just outside of cities. And they realized that it's very difficult, either as someone who's used to the city or as a queer person, if you don't have a built-in community. And so I think that was something we found to be very important, is how close we are to the city. And there's kind of already a built-in community of people that visit here often, and so we have people here all the time, which makes it viable for us.
Got the hot tub.
Yeah, exactly.
I also think that we don't represent really a true case of what it means to like move to a truly rural town. We're in this like queer haven. We're on the most progressive rural county in America, and so I don't think there was anything necessarily about this that really exemplifies like that bold, crazy move into a community that has different political views than you. But I do think what's really interesting is for people to start challenging this idea that there are no rural spaces for queers. Right. That's actually changing very quickly. And so it's not about like you can't move to a rural space. It's about find that rural space that really is embracing queer culture. Truly, we were so pleasantly surprised when we moved up here how aligned everybody is in this area, and we kind of feel like we won the best of both worlds. Literally, we'll go to a young farmers dinner and we'll just be sitting in the corner and talking with people, and it'll be like, oh, you're queer, you're farmers, and you're into Dungeons and Dragons like us. Like, how the hell did we find each other? Small space. Yeah. But I think there's a big movement from cities to more rural areas. Also, just because queers have always been pioneer species. They're always the ones exploring what's interesting and what's new and what's challenging the status quo. And I think the status quo right now is living in cities, and a lot of people are getting out and trying to rediscover sort of the faggots and their friends between revolutions part of themselves. Do you guys know that book?
Yeah,
it's incredible. But I think that spirit of like being more in touch with our ecosystems and challenging the status quo of capitalism is becoming a new awoken energy in a lot of queer people, and much of that means moving into and populating different spaces, and that's happening in a big way right now.
Yeah, but don't you guys miss spending $40 on brunch? I mean, isn't that something that you cherish that you can't get where you are now?
Whenever I really, really need to, I go to the city just to spend $40 on brunch.
Okay.
I think.
Yeah. I need to see a drag queen.
I have to get my fix. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. There's also a book. I mean, speaking of books, there's one book that I don't know why this comes to mind, but there's A Home at the End of the World, Michael Cunningham. It was sort of about like a queer family moving out to this sort of like middle nowhere New York, and just sort of in a small town. And it sort of is symbol. It's not there. It wasn't a farm, but it's similar to what you guys are talking about, that idea of just sort of, going in a different direction than what a lot of other people do, which is really cool. So I would recommend that book.
Yeah.
But where can people find out more about Solarpunk Farms and like the possibilities of what they can do, how they can visit, all of the things?
Yeah, we really live and die on Instagram right now. That's our core vehicle. We are millennials. So follow us on Instagram, shoot us messages. We love to talk. If you guys are ever folks are ever in the area, Google Maps right now says we're closed, but just because we haven't finished our permits yet. But shoot us a text, stop on by. Our doors are always open.
Wonderful. And where can people follow both of you?
Also on Instagram, I'm spencer.r.scott. Rolls off the tongue. Nick and Schwanz.
Yeah, and it's just mostly pictures of my mom and Spencer. So
Nice.
Lovely.
my mom's hot. It's cool.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you
thanks
both so much for
guys.
doing this.
Yeah, thanks so much.
And another thing.
So according to the internet and the very online, this is the summer of hot rodent boyfriends. It refers to guys who have rodent-like qualities, which I guess means little like snout-like faces, maybe beady eyes, a sort of pointy nose. We're talking Barry Keoghan. I think I don't know how you say Barry Keoghan from Saltburn. Keoghan,
Yeah.
Timothy Chalamet, Jeremy Allen White, Kieran Culkin, Nicholas Hoult. And
I
I'm
wouldn't
wondering,
include Tom Holland. That you listed Tom Holland, but I wouldn't think he's rodent-like.
he's a little more like,
He's a
like
little bit more
pleasant.
like Nordic looking.
yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
But it is a thing, and you know the internet obviously always has its eye. It's a very horny place, and they've always got their eye on somebody, the boyfriend, Oscar Isaac or Pedro Pascal. But the horny, the hot rodent boyfriend is now trending, and I mean, I'm wondering what you guys think, if you would ever be attracted to a hot rodent type of gentleman. Brent, we know, loves an elfin man with, you know,
I
skinny.
think anyone who knows me knows that my tastes skew towards the rat end of the spectrum when it comes
Truly.
to rodents. And there is a guy at my gym right now who I am obsessed with. And I'm not kidding. It is like he's like a real life version of a Disney rat. He just has this like, just his beady eyes, pointy nose.
Wow.
And I'm just like obsessed with him.
Yeah.
And I finally timed it just right. So I went to the bathroom in the locker room while he was getting unchanged. So that was great. That was a good moment. But he's really hot. He's just really hot. And so I'm all about this like style of guy.
Yeah, you are.
And so this is like, yeah, this is my bread
Do
and
any of
butter.
these famous versions appeal to you?
I mean, yeah. Oh, yeah, Brent. I mean, you're the one who
Brent,
is a
I'm
boner for
curious.
these types. Like, do you have? I mean, do you know,
I've always thought Timothy Chalamet, who I find annoying, but I've always thought he's very handsome. Who's the guy in the bottom right? What's his name, Elliot?
I don't know who that is actually.
Oh, okay.
oh,
Yeah,
he's
sorry.
like-
I don't know. Sometimes like Hollywood actors just tend to be so like excessively handsome that you're like, they're almost like not real.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, you know, again, a rat-like human at my gym is like spot on for me.
Yeah, I mean that the guy in that picture is Mike Feist from Challengers.
Okay.
That's what he's famous from.
Oh, of course.
No,
I'm sorry.
I get it.
Challengers.
I mean, no. Do you know the movie Challengers?
No, I've
No, he
never
doesn't
heard
know
of
the
such a
Challengers.
thing in my entire life.
It was one of the hottest movies of early summer, so everyone listening is like, "Oh, the movie Challengers." Yes, I know that
I think
actor.
it was hotter with like Gen Z.
No,
No?
everyone's. I mean, it was hot. It was a queer movie, so like everyone
Yeah.
was kind of talking about it.
Yeah.
I mean, queer
Hottest
Jason.
movie ever, $93 million at the box office.
Yeah,
and I hear you. I know. I
93
understand.
million, considering the state of the box office, is actually pretty
That
good.
is fair.
But that said, I get it. I totally get it. I mean, there is something about Barry Keoghan that like, but it isn't his face. It's the way he acts and the way.
Oh, it's
sort
not
of
his face? He's got those bedroom eyes.
No, it's not his face. It's the way he acts, and it's the way he presents himself, and sort of his comfortability. And also, I mean, that nude scene in whatever that movie was,
Saltburn.
Saltburn. Thank you. Was, I mean, it wasn't brave, but it was a lot of flopping around, and that was enjoyable. And the movie was kind of, but I mean, I'm into it. Like I get it. I get why. I mean, Jeremy Allen White from The Bear, like he's another one. He did the Calvin Klein ad. He's. I get why he's hot.
I have been I thought he's the most. No, here, Brent looking up Jeremy Allen, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's not.
He's the one in
not
that
Yeah.
picture.
He's not cute.
I mean, you guys should be watching the podcast just to see Brent Googling. That really is. That's what the segment is about. Watch Brent Google.
He looks like
Like
the guy
Gene
from
Wilder?
Yeah, Gene Wilder.
Yeah, he's a hot
Jeremy-
Gene Wilder. I thought I never even watched Shameless, and I know I'm just like,
Oh, he was so
is
hot on Shameless.
so attractive. And then
Yeah.
Brent, have you watched The Bear, Brent?
No.
Yeah, he's very like brooding and sexy in that, and it works.
But there's something also about
works.
him, and they're all kind of. I mean, they're not all short, but he's short, and,
Right.
and so there is kind of something about that, I guess.
Yeah.
No, there's just something about these guys that I think like. Who's the other one? There was the other guy from Challengers. I forget his name. He's also in The Crown, and I'm totally blanking on his name. But him as well. He played the Prince
Nicholas
Charles
Hoult?
in The Crown. No, not Nicholas Hoult. The Crown. But
I don't know.
he's in Challengers. I'll find his name. But anyway, I get why they're hot because they're also with all of these guys. Every single one of them. Josh O'Connor is the actor's name for people screaming at home who obviously knew who I was talking about. There's something about them that they all have a queer undertone to them. Every single one of them. There is something, either it's Jeremy Allen White's Calvin Klein ad, or it's Josh O'Connor's very, explicit queer performances, or it's Timothy Chalamet with Call Me By Your Name. They all have this, and even in their social media presences oftentimes, or how they are marketed to us, there is this queer aesthetic to them that appeals to both women, because they run the internet, but also to queer men. And I think that's a big part of it too. That this sort of the obsession with the not typical George Clooney, because gay guys, you never hear a gay guy going crazy over
Kevin
a George
Costner.
Clooney. You don't hear it. You don't hear that shit. You know what I mean?
Denzel.
But you do hear it over. You do. Yeah, but you do hear it over. You do hear. Well, I mean, Burt Reynolds. I think a lot of our listeners will say that Burt Reynolds' picture of him naked on that rug or whatever is something that they definitely experience.
Yeah, I'm sure a few.
But
yes.
That said, but you do hear it over Josh O'Connor, Timothy Chalamet. Like, you hear that. One thing I will say about this, though, that is kind of upsetting is that there, in the whole rodent obsession, there is a lack of diversity. There's a massive lack of diversity in it, in that we only lust over these white dudes, and we only go crazy over these white dudes. And I think there's a lot of reasons for it. I don't know why, but
not me, Mr. H. Allen Scott, because I was just thinking while we were talking that this, you guys know, I won't give his name.
Yes, I knew exactly what you were thinking of.
There's a guy who I've, been smitten with for 7 years, who lives in San Diego, and he looks like a
He's
man.
a rat.
He looks like a mouse.
He's a little rat. A little
what
rat
I'm
mouse.
talking
Man.
about,
He's a person of color.
I understand that you
boring.
have a
person so boring.
You have an attraction to someone in San Diego who's a person of color that looks like a rodent. But I'm talking about the internet collectively only choosing white dudes to lust at.
Can I also tell you a story? There was a guy I used to see around Hollywood. He would walk around shirtless. He was very, very attractive. He was an actor. And I would sometimes go to his Instagram and masturbate. That said, he's an actor. And I just discovered yesterday that he shot a movie a couple of years ago where he has gay scenes in it, and they're really, really hot. And that said, he still follows Donald Trump.
Cool.
Always a good feeling.
Are you still jerking off to his Instagram then?
Sure. Yeah. I make exceptions, Alan.
He won't go to Austin, Texas. But he'll jerk off to this dude.
Let freedom ring.
Yeah.
What would your aunt say?
Brent, what would your Aunt Ramona say about something she heard on today's show?
Marsha-Ann Alito is my new hero.
My Aunt Joanne would say, it sounds like hot rodent boyfriend is just code for Jew.
I mean, there's an argument there.
There's an argument.
Sure. There is an argument.
We support that on this podcast.
Yeah.
Oh, no, we don't support this argument.
Oh, right. Not one we support. No.
What about Aunt Ann?
Aunt Ann would say, I'm going to say it right now, the only rodent I've ever loved is Paul Lynn from Charlotte's Web. Do you remember? Like Templeton. I love that little gay rodent. That little gay rodent.
Very
he
good.
just wanted to play in the trash, just like you boys.
So See, Charlotte's Web is a lot more famous than Challengers.
Oh my God, Brent! Would you just read a
Challengers.
newspaper one day?
Go to Axios.
Challengers.
Yeah, go to Axios something. They wrote about
Taking
it.
the world by storm. $12 million. Challengers. Starring. Let's see. What is this list?
You know Zendaya?
You
Hold
don't
on.
know. You don't know Zendaya.
I do know Zendaya. Starring
Okay.
Zendaya and Shane Harris and the legendary Nada Despotovich and world famous Jake Jensen. Good luck.
I don't know any of these
See you
people either, to
later.
be honest.
Yeah, I don't
No,
know
I'm
them.
just
I know
teasing.
the
I'm just
3
teasing.
stars of the movie.
It's just a movie that's like discourse, you know. And I didn't see it. I'm just like, oh, it's not gonna, I don't know if it's going to make a lot of money. It just feels like discourse.
Everyone wanted to see them
Sure.
fuck. That was the whole reason. Josh
I
O'Connor
don't
and Mike
care.
Weiss. That was the reason why people wanted to see the
Yeah,
movie.
yeah.
Have fun.